Happy Tuesday. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hope you had a nice trip to the
Yes,
mountains.
going away for a quick trip is always fun.
Yes.
So today, Tuesday noon, we are here to talk about MVP. So not only is it about minimum viable project, but it's also about value. So we're going to dig into how does an MVP, how do we define value? And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to ask you a few questions and then you can talk through your experience on a
Yep.
particular project. And then we can kind of go from there. And if there are questions out there, feel free to chime in. So, first off, tell me a little bit about your experience with a specific project that was
Yep.
set out to create and develop an MVP. So, what was your role, the project timeline, the size of the team? So, give us a little bit of detail about the context of the project.
Yeah, sure. So I worked on a few what we call MVP products, or that was the initiative. I think, the big one I was on for, oh my goodness, actually several years in the end, was probably the perfect example of, or blend of what to do and not to do. And I think that's where, so it was a product where we essentially need to start over, right? So you had competitors out there in the field. You had a product put out there that just, how do you say, it wasn't working? It was
Mhm.
pretty much you got to start over, you got to rebuild. So, and it was the right approach to take. Hey, we've got to get out there quickly. We're behind at this point. Let's do, the big thing, the big trending topic was MVP, MVP. So that's the approach we took in order to get things out in the market. The good was get things out, kind of move with rapid experimentation, rapid development, release in increments, all the things that can be good. Where we failed was the minimum, and the viable. You ignore that MVP is to be. It's got to be viable, not just minimal. Minimal
Right.
releases. So if it's there's no value, it's not viable. And that's kind of what happened in that situation because great features were being iteratively released, but given where we were in the marketplace at that time, it just didn't carry enough value. So these incremental releases didn't carry the value needed to get the engagement we needed.
Mhm.
So I would also say another thing that happened with that project is rather than really prioritizing the set of features you're going to focus on for that MVP release, it became a let's release an MVP of every feature. And just kept doing that for, a year or 2 years. And it's like, you had all these features out there, but none of them carried any value because you were just constantly meeting this minimum requirement faster, get it out there, get it out there. Again, it needed to happen, but you kind of we lost sight of the value of
Mhm.
what we were releasing. So I think, like in the newsletter, it said, there's viable and there's valuable. Minimum doesn't get it if it's not truly viable. And to me,
Mhm.
back to the
And
value.
the viable part of it is valuable.
Exactly. Because if
Yeah.
it's not valuable, then no matter how great you think you've done and how fast you
Mhm.
release, it's just a minimal product piece out there that
It's just
people
the
don't want
thing.
to engage
Yeah.
in. So
Just the
my role was, as you know, I kind of wasn't a product manager, but I ended up being kind of a proxy as well as leading the UX effort, manage that team as well. And I think when we went into it, the intention was good. We were making the right decision that, hey, we've got to catch up. But I think we lost focus that doesn't mean that every single, you can't leave that MVP there for an extended period of time. So we did chunk things into, feature releases, get something out there quickly. The intent initially was then you build on that to really reach that value there and to capture the learnings while you're doing that. The problem was you just moved from feature to feature to feature, and they all were in this. I just call it minimum.
Or half
Minimum
baked.
rate.
They
It
were
was
half
half
baked.
baked.
Yeah.
And that's fine if your next release, your next iteration is going to more fully bake it, because the great things about MVPs is you can get them out there. You can capture learnings, that sort of thing, and then build on that to make something a truly viable release, or valuable product. So,
Right. So let's step back a little bit. Going from 0 to first iteration of delivery.
yeah.
What was that timeline? How big was your team? What were the core roles on that team? What were some of the tenets of this is the MVP and we want to put out, blankety blank. We want to have, like you said, a little bit of each feature, or was there other things that were stated as upfront goals around that first iteration of delivery?
Yeah, so first we were a truly lean team. We truly took on a startup mentality, even down to the team size. We had, I think that was a team of 10 maybe initially. And going in, we had some of the marketing research, because again, there were competitors out there. By the way, we can circle back to that, but that's very important, because now what is viable and valuable, what that minimum viable piece is very different depending on, are you is are you kind of owning the space? You're pioneers going out there doing something. Very different story than when you have some pretty mature competitors that are already out there. So I think, that was the key difference here. We were operating like a startup. That worked well because you could move faster. You could collaborate more closely. We had a cross-discipline team. So there's a development team, there's a marketing team, there's a UX team, there's a QA team. It was all one tight group, and it did allow us to move quickly. I think where things kind of went south again, and I don't want to say south, there were lots of learnings, I think, for the organization as a whole, because we were a pilot type of project and group. But again, was not really looking at the space. We weren't introducing something new at that time. So you weren't going to get away and take away that market share from the competitors with a truly MVP product. So, but the good, I need to, stress the good that happened in that was we were able to capture learnings quickly and along the way of real usage, real feedback, real experiments in within the product itself to drive how should we prioritize things. But when you're playing that kind of catch-up game, what happens is MVP of this major feature, MVP of this major feature, and you're just so constantly catching up. You never get, especially when you have those really lean, small teams, you don't have the same opportunity to go back and build. You're just running. So that was probably the hard part of the project. And I think in hindsight, we should have continued to release those MVPs of features, but picked, based on what the user needs, which we knew we were doing that lean experimentation. We knew the core functionality that would get us the most traction based on the Google ads, changing up the marketing message to see what drove the most traffic. So we got that kind of data, and we should have stuck with it. Like, okay, they're saying this, let's just say billing is the core functionality they want. These other pieces are really important. What we probably should have done is really honed in on that aspect of the solution before moving on to some of the bigger, trying to grow too fast. I mean, in a way, is what ended up happening. And so we found ourselves very stretched thin. We started getting new stakeholders in there with competing priorities, and that really impacted that ability to act like you're lean and to start focusing on the value, not only getting it out quickly, but getting out something that adds value, something that is fully solving, eventually solving a problem of the customer versus kind of a Band-Aid here, a Band-Aid there. But hey, we were able to report, we released MVP of X, MVP of Y, but we never went back and really looked at it. We've started misusing the term minimum viable product, So it all became about speed and quantity versus the quality of what we were delivering to people.
Interesting. So with that being said, what I'm hearing is in starting a project like this, from inception, you want to have or stack hands on team, right size team.
Yes.
And what does speed to market versus quality mean, and how do you balance those two so that you are getting to the market quickly, especially if you're catching up or you're trying to stay ahead of the competition?
Yes.
Because of your differentiation, but that you have to make sure that you balance that with quality of features, which I know you want to go a little bit deeper on this, but that means you have to come into a project like this with a level of insight that came through discovery and that sort of thing, with what matters to your customer, their journey, et cetera. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So you've got to know what is that V in MVP. What is that value? Don't guess, right? You need, if you're taking this approach and you're operating lean and you're trying to release things, get things out there, be sure you have a really firm grasp of, okay, what is going to bring that. If you're doing a minimum release, what's going to be valuable, what's going to be viable. So absolutely, that market research, that getting out there with your target audience, figuring out what is going to be that value, is I think it's really critical, especially if you're operating lean. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because it's like, well, we're operating lean. How do we have time to do all this? You do, and you need to. It becomes more important because you are operating with fewer resources. You're putting things out there that aren't fully baked. And by the way, I'm not against MVPs. I'm very much a person that, let's not go back to waterfall, think back in the good old IBM days when you worked on something 2 years, you cut the CDs back in the day, and that was
the big reveal, right?
The big reveal, and then you hope everything goes well.
Right.
So I'm not advocating that at all. I'm advocating, don't abuse the term MVP. Make sure you keep that V in mind, and be able to clearly define how do you know it's viable, and how do you know it's valuable, and keep building until you reach that V, even if it's in iteration. So, and I think there are a lot of ways, there are many ways we know we can start figuring that out. And I think there are a lot of experiments you can do as well when you're releasing those MVPs to figure things out as well. Like what's going to make people sign up more. We would look based on that messaging and based on these set of features. Hey, will you sign up for a beta? And by the way, I think betas are really important when you're talking about MVPs. That was a big thing we did because it gave us the opportunity, knowing we didn't have, the 5 years that competitor had been building and building, and they really could get away with truly maybe not so viable because they were introducing those new features. But for us, it was a catch-up game. And so anyhow.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So in that experimentation, outside of experimentation, were there other ways in which you involved customers and prospects in that feedback loop, in that iteration process? Was it just beta and work and experimentation, or were there other things that you were doing?
Well, there were definitely other things that were going on. So, I mean, a lot of the standard stuff we do. One thing before it was in a beta or before features were released, you can still do testing type sessions with users to get their feedback. But we both know a lot of times what they say and the reality of things can be very different. But we would at least try to get that feedback ahead of time with that target base. And hopefully we'd know, okay, this isn't going to hit it, but let's get it out there so we can start building on it and getting actual feedback while it's out there so we can prioritize things. But Kenya, we did almost anything and everything you could do from a research perspective, from feedback perspective.
Yes.
Again, it became so clear that we just simply started, I don't want to say abusing, but in a way misusing that MVP, and not focusing, and I'll harp on that, not focusing on that value piece. It really, really was faster, faster, faster. And you had executive leadership, like often happens that, faster, 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 we're behind, but hey, let's keep in check, because you know about this particular project, lots of, blood, sweat, and tears for years went into it. Lean teams, people pulling 60, 70, 80 hours a week in work. And in the end, it's gone, and was it because of lack of efforts, lack of understanding?
Absolutely not.
It was completely losing sight of what value you needed to bring for that product to survive and be successful.
Right. And so with that being said, what were 3 gotchas or ahas that the team learned overall as a result?
I think don't grow too fast. So, we went into it as this lean team, trying to get something in the market, trying to get people on board. And our model was working so well, and the innovation part was working so well that the organization just decided we're going to grow, and we're going to grow really fast, and for that project team. So that was, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it did kind of disrupt, based on what we were doing. Introducing new stakeholders with competing demands when we didn't even have a truly viable product out there. So anything that came in that took away from the first becoming a viable, valuable product ended up becoming a distraction. When that occurs, you never circle back to some of those key pieces based on your research and initial objectives. You just know how it goes. You don't get back there, or it takes, in this case, we were going to get back there. It just took too long. And so so that was a big gotcha, and everything kind of
snowballed.
It snowballed from there, because while you get the feedback, man, you're innovative. You've got one of the easiest to use apps, but you are so lacking the features we need in this particular area, and that particular area. And that, again, it was because we went with minimum. And none of those were valuable in and of themselves to those users. So that really was a huge gotcha. And again, trying to grow too fast out of that startup mentality, and then trying to carry forth that kind of lean startup mentality, but blowing up. In this case, I think the team grew. I mean, it quadrupled in size overnight. I mean,
Wow.
management, now
Yeah.
several managers. So all of those kind of things, and making sure you're getting that right audience. So
Right.
there was another gotcha was what was viable and reported as valuable to one sector wasn't at all to the other. And that wasn't really, we tried to account for it, but you can just kind of lose sight of it when you become, even me, too focused on God deliver, God deliver, God deliver.
Doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing is a really important component of the planning, and this is kind of going back to square one and your starting point is breadth versus depth.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you all did a little bit of both, where the depth was shallow, but there was all this breadth. And so you
Yeah.
never really got into the depth of those key features of the application, where if the plan was more around, okay, here's what breadth looks like, but we're going to go deep in these particular feature sets or capabilities within the application. And if everyone could stack hands on that in the beginning and then move forward from there, it sounds like things may have taken a different turn at some point.
They may have, because be a rock star at something, but
Yeah.
while you're building up. And I get you have to have a certain level of breadth, and it doesn't need to be completely solution.
Mm-hmm.
But when you release, go back and don't make that a minimum feature or product anymore. Make it a valuable product. So again, I think that M is what gets a lot of people, because it ends up being a crutch. I can't tell you the number of developers who were like, yeah, but we just need an MVP. Yeah, but this feature is a highly prioritized feature. They're not going to use it without. Yeah, but that's not an MVP. It's like
You just said a really key piece of it is MVP. Having a feature present in your MVP, just because it's there doesn't mean that it's useful or doesn't mean that it's valuable, and that the fact that it's present is not enough. And what you have, and going back to that depth piece, what it looks like in terms of helping me improve my workflow or get something done faster, more effective, more accurately, whatever that may look like. Without that, it's really just another area, another piece of the puzzle, but it doesn't really do anything for me.
Yes, absolutely. And people aren't going to engage. And again,
Right.
look at the market where you're trying to go in and play. Look at what's there. Look at your competitors, because it doesn't mean you have to you don't have to be absolutely competitive with your competitors out the gate. Like, oh, we got to wait until we have everything these people have. But it does mean there's a certain expectation there. And if you're falling short on every front, pick something when you first start and do it really, really well. Do it better than anyone. Release quick, release in iterations. That would be my suggestion when you're in a crowded market, where you have lots of competitors with very robust solutions. That would be mine. Maybe your MVP should be focused on a component of your future solution, so you find a way to differentiate yourself in that market. So,
and the key to what I think I really like the way you summed it all up. And the key to everything that you're saying goes back to your discovery work. It goes back to you truly understanding your customer and prospect and where you can deliver value differently or where no one else is. You can't get to that real value or viability without that.
Yes. And last thing I'll say about it is let your customers know in some way, that this isn't the end all be all. You are releasing in
Mhm.
these iterations. More is coming. We
Mm,
used to do a lot of things like putting beta features in the product
mhm.
that weren't actually working, but it let them know, hey, this isn't it,
Coming. Mhm.
and it let us, we were able to gain learnings by seeing how many people were
Mhm.
actually navigating or trying to use that beta feature. We went really lean experimentation on that sometimes, but it let them know we were moving and where we were going, but it also gave us a lot of learnings in that
Yeah, I love
regard,
that.
because they don't know that this is not the end of it, and in
Right,
the subscription based models like you have today,
right.
they come in, they do a trial. I think, they might sign back in after signing up for a trial. They're going to play around and with the product I'm talking about, and then they're out and they've signed up for the next guy,
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
that trial. So some way of conveying you're listening, you're working, you're going to be quickly
Mhm.
releasing features helps as well. So finding a strategy of how do you engage with the customer in that way became very important for us as well.
Mm,
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I really liked kind of tying that story from planning to execution to those ahas and gotchas. And I think there's a lot to be said around the story that there is to tell around the experience and the things that you avoid in the next project as a result. So those retrospectives are important,
Yes.
really important. So, well, thank you so much for listening. You can contact us at info@leangeeks.net if you have any questions. And we thank you again for listening today, and we will see you next week. Bye.